Just wind. The force of gravity pulling them down endlessly. A serene, supernatural passivity being pushed into their mind by the plane itself, but their psychopathy overpowered the plane's influence on them. "Gods damn it!" they shouted, their voice getting lost in the endless blue sky and white clouds. Before they could react, a streak flew out of the portal above them, flying directly towards the center of their vision. The bullet sunk a couple inches into Krelo's skull, clutching their blown-out shoulder and their now destroyed left eye. Krelo began to violently spin as they fell through the endless expanse of Serania. Krelo tried to shapeshift into a species capable of flight, but their body began shifting through many different forms. First, a male human, then a female elf, then a male fire primordian, then a male half-elf, and lastly a female owlin. However, the forms didn't hold. The damage they had sustained was far too great. Krelo involuntarily shifted back into their true form. Quickly approaching them from below, the jagged, rocky edge of a floating island seemed like the last thing Krelo would see before their soul was drawn into Dolur. Right before their body met stone, as if by pure instinct, their body pivoted in the air to fall parallel with the rock instead of directly into it. As they drew and then stuck their daggers into the stone, all they could hear was the ripping through stone and a ringing, and their vision began to grow dark. Their hands grew weak, but eventually, Krelo came to a stop. They dangled there for a while. At one point, Krelo began to hear a high-pitched screaming falling towards them from the same direction they fell, right before they heard what was a mixture of a crunch and a splat. The body of one of Krelo's lieutenants now laid on the edge of the floating island. Summoning all of their might, Krelo began to climb the rock face using their daggers as climbing apparatuses. Krelo barely managed to pull themselves over the cliff face, and as soon as they were safely above ground, Krelo's body shut down and everything went dark. Through the darkness, a mechanical voice rang out. "Come on, champ. We have got you." "Do we have to help them?" replied a deeper and raspier voice. "Yes, you big dummy. We were helped, so we help people. It is what we do." "You got helped. I would have been fine." "That is just not how it works. You know that." "I'm willing to try it." As Krelo's remaining eye opened, the first voice spoke again. "Easy there. It looks like you have been through a lot." Standing over them, Krelo saw a very large-bodied creature. On the creature's shoulders sat two separate heads. Most of one head was mechanical, starting at the left chin and going up to the side of their left eye. Bright teal bulbs sat where eyes should be, and a half-metal jaw sat as the square head's foundation. The other egg-shaped head was seemingly entirely flesh. With a very distinct underbite, two large, sharp teeth came out of the head's bottom mandible, rising over its top lip. This head had two deep green eyes and long brown hair that was braided with many little knickknacks interwoven throughout. Krelo immediately knew what they were dealing with. An Etten, multi-headed giantkin of volatile temperament. However, this Etten seemed calmer than most, more passive. There was still conflict and disagreement between the creature's two personalities, but they were minor compared to what an Etten usually dealt with. Krelo groaned. "Where am I?" Before the Etten could even respond, Krelo rapidly took in the environment. They were in one of the Etten's arms, hovering in the air over shops and stalls that seemed to stretch for as far as their eye could see. Creatures of all sorts and origins wandered the endless bazaar, talking and trading all kinds of fantastical items. "We are in Serania, the azure sky, specifically, the immeasurable market layer of Serania. We are taking you back to our shop to finish patching you up," said the mechanical voice, as its head was scanning the environment. It wasn't until then that Krelo had felt the weight of the injuries they had sustained. Their head ached more than it ever had in their decades of life, and their right shoulder felt like it wasn't even there, yet it somehow still hurt. Feeling and looking themselves over, Krilo felt a sizable amount of bandages wrapped around their head where their left eye once was. Their right shoulder was also wrapped in some type of bandaging they had never seen before. "How are you flying? Ettins can't fly," Krilo said, a little more hostile than the situation called for. "We all fly here, dummy. This place is magic," replied the gravelly voice. "Try it. Just think of flying, and you will fly." The absurdity of that statement barely hit Krilo as the Ettin's arm on the side of the fleshy head threw them into the open air. Like when they had first jumped through the portal that brought them here, Krilo was once again free-falling through the sky. Now, in a pained panic, Krilo focused their mind on the thought of flight, and as if a natural part of them, Krilo began to float in the air. "Why did you just throw them? We are trying to help them," said the mechanical voice. Laughing, the raspy voice replied, "You are trying to help them. I am trying to have fun. And that was fun." Seemingly in control of their flight, Krilo flew up to the Ettin and pointed their finger at the creature's fleshy head accusingly. Feeling the plane's influence once again, and being too tired to resist this time, Krilo simply said, "That was not nice. I didn't appreciate that." Taken aback by their own forgiving attitude, Krilo wanted to make another attempt at cussing the Ettin out, but the mechanical head stopped them. "Do not try to be too aggressive. You will just tire yourself out. Serania has a way of making people more pleasant to deal with." Wanting to spit an insult back, Krilo's exhaustion made them give up. They hated the feeling of being defeated, but it seemed like they would have to get used to it, at least for a little bit. "Well, can we get to your shop then? I can really use whatever it is you have to patch me up. I feel like shit," Krilo said.
"Fine, but you owe us after we help you," said the raspy voice.
"They do not owe us a thing. After we get them healed up, they can go about their business," said the mechanical voice, now slowly flying into the bazaar. The Ettin stopped in front of a medium-sized two-story building. The building was square and made of many different kinds of colorful bricks. Anywhere else, this building would have looked chaotic and gaudy, but in the immeasurable market, it was actually a fairly normal-looking building. The Ettin opened the front door and held it open for Krilo. Krilo paused and took a second, reading the small closed sign hanging on the inside of the door, and the large sign hung above the door with the words, "The Wumdas Brothers Mystic Emporium," written on it in glowing ink.
"Come on in, Tiny. My brother here wants to patch you up," said the raspy voice.
"I'm coming. Just give me a damn minute. I got half my face blown off," Krilo replied as they walked into the building. "Here, let me get your things," the mechanical voice said as they reached their mechanical arm towards Krilo. At first, Krilo wanted to push the Ettin back, but they were far too weak to stop them from taking their things. The Ettin took Krilo's belt and cloak, and with them all of their equipment and weapons, flinging the relatively small garb over one of their shoulders. As the Ettin began walking towards a staircase at the back of their shop, Krilo looked around. They saw everything. There was armor, clothing, jewelry, monster parts, potions, weapons, and many more random oddities. Without even needing to focus, Krilo could tell that most everything in the shop bore supernatural power. The Ettin stood at the top of the stairs, its mechanical arm motioning for them to follow. Krilo obliged, following up the stairs to a door. The Ettin opened the door, undoing a lock with a key they pulled from a satchel at their side, and held it open for Krilo. Krilo stepped into what looked to be a quaint living room filled to the brim with colorful and luxurious-looking furniture. "Now that you have entered our home, I suppose we should introduce ourselves. I am Zalas Wumdas," said the mechanical voice.
"And I am none of your business,"
chimed the raspy voice. The mechanical head shot their fleshy brother a mean look before they said,
"And I am Zalzadar Wumdas,"
in a bit of an annoyed tone. "So who are you?" Zalas probed. "Does it matter who I am?"
"Only if you want our help,"
Zalzadar replied. Krilo looked to Zalas for an out, only to see an equally expectant expression on his face. Krilo sighed, then tried his best to look both of the heads in their eyes at the same time. "My name is Finn." They lied, but the Etten seemed to take it as truth. "It is nice to meet you, Finn. Let me start changing out those bandages," Zalas said as he reached for Krilo's bandages. Krilo winced as the Etten's two giant arms slowly began unwrapping their face bandage. Zalzadar leaned in to inspect Krilo's shoulder wound as Zalas looked at Krilo's missing eye.
"How did you end up in Sarania, and that fucked up?" Zalzadar asked,
seeming to open up to the intrigue of the situation. "I came from the plane of Thalanis. I was helping my friends fight off an attack from some planar invaders. They got the drop on us and fucked us right up. I used an amulet I had to escape the scuffle, but nobody else made it," Krilo said, trying to put on a distraught face. "I am sorry to hear that. We had a similar encounter on Ebron that led us here, so we can empathize with your plight," Zalas replied. After rewrapping their head bandage and stitching up Krilo's shoulder, the Etten stood up and made their way over to a drawer next to what seemed to be a stove. The Etten opened the drawer, pulling out a trio of plates and 3 sets of utensils. The plates seemed to be made of solid marble, and the utensils solid gold. The Etten walked over to the stove and lit a fire in it. "You can stay with us for as long as you need. Maybe you can help around the shop a bit, but for now, let us have dinner," said Zalas, who was now pulling out some pots of food to cook.
"You'll definitely be helping around the shop," Zalzadar quickly added.
Zalas let out what seemed to be a stiff chuckle and didn't disagree. Krilo looked over at his daggers hanging over the Etten's shoulders, then down to the utensils laid before them. 3 forks and 3 knives. As the Etten cooked, Krilo's hand slowly hovered over 2 of the knives, then quickly drew them under the table. "Do you mind if I look around?" Krilo asked, noting the stone floor that made little to no noise as they walked across it.
"Sure. Just stay out of my room," said Zalzadar,
only half joking. "As long as you can walk on your own, it is fine with me," said Zalas, throwing some alien-looking plant into one of the pots. Krilo slowly stood out of his chair and began making their way over towards the Etten. One step at a time, they matched their steps with the chopping of food or the sizzling of meat. "You know, it is funny how similar our stories are," said Zalas. A step.
"That's how Zalas's face got messed up. We were attacked by some time raiders," Zalzadar added.
Another step. "We too had someone from Sarania help us. A very talented artificer they were," Zalas said, pointing to his arm and face as he cooked. Another.
"That's why Zalas here wanted to help you. He thinks we owe the world or something silly like that," Zalzadar said.
One last step. "If you want, we can help you find the people who did this to you," Zalas offered.
"I wouldn't mind a chance to crush some skulls. Sarania has taken that pleasure away from me,"
Zalzadar said, looking off as if daydreaming about something. "I don't think that'll be necessary," Krilo said, raising the knives and fighting off the plane's influence to stop the act they were about to commit. As the Etten turned, Krilo sunk one knife into each of the creatures' faces. The sound of the scuffle was muffled by the building and drowned out by the cordial banter and sales going on throughout the rest of the immeasurable market. It wasn't too long after that Krilo stood over Zalas and Zalzadar, even more bloodied and battered, but with a slight smile on his face. "Now, let's get to work."